Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Elon speaks. Indeed, Elon Musk, standing next to President Trump, was in the Oval Office. There you see the video for his first extensive comments about the Department of Government Efficiency, which he leads, and which he said, with care and compassion, those are his words, care and compassion, $1 trillion in savings can be found within the federal budget and federal deficit reduction. Care and compassion. Well, we'll see. Details yet to emerge on that. Let's hear a little bit of what Elon Musk had to say in the Oval Office.
If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy.
What is the power of bureaucracy? What is the power of a billionaire? That's a big topic. Start tonight with Aaron Navarro on a snowy North Lawn at the White House, and Ed O'Keefe with me right here. Ed, you and I watched Elon Musk with the president. Your takeaways?
Well, the first thing to consider here is these are his first extended remarks since being assigned by President Trump to take on this gargantuan task of revamping and trimming the sails of the federal government. So newsy and important regardless to get him on the record.
Right.
That he brought his son along and was wearing an overcoat and a hat is just, icing on the cake. But he did concede that he's trying, as you said, to cut about $1 trillion. Conceded that sometimes some of his public statements are going to be incorrect and he deserves to be corrected. Said that he appreciates that there are detractors, but that the American public, and the president said this as well, have voted for this kind of radical change, and so they're trying to implement it. And notably, the president said that when there are court orders from judges to try to slow or stop some of the early bold moves they've tried to make, he will comply with them, even if he will appeal them vigorously.
And Elon Musk said, look, if anyone thinks there's a conflict of interest, they will call me out on it.
Yep.
And the president said, if we think there's a conflict of interest, we will stop him. That's basically asking the American public to rely on the good offices of the President of the United States and the man he quite clearly trusts to decide what or whether there's a conflict of interest, Elon Musk.
And remember, our polling from Sunday suggests that there is some concern that perhaps he has too much influence, at least among a plurality of Americans. And so the fact that the president's saying, again, we'll be on the lookout for this, may not go over well with a lot of skeptics who wonder, should a billionaire, the richest man in the world, have this much power over the federal government spending?
And in the show open, we saw a piece of sound from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. I'll come back to you on that momentarily. I want to get to the North Lawn and Aaron Navarro. Aaron, from your vantage point, that was an unexpected appearance for Elon Musk, probably sending reverberations throughout the press room there this afternoon.
Yeah, it's not only a clear visual that Elon Musk and President Trump are in lockstep, but also on paper, the White House said that President Trump signed an executive order that essentially emboldens the mission of the government or the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, to really make these cuts. The executive order that Trump signed tells federal agency heads to work with DOGE when it comes to large-scale reductions in force. It says that they need to limit any hiring to just, quote, essential positions only, and said that agencies can determine if they need to combine certain departments or eliminate them if they, quote, are not functions required by law. I also thought it was notable how Elon Musk talked a lot and was asked about transparency regarding DOGE. Everything that we here at CBS News have been hearing from government employees in USAID and CFPB, these agencies that DOGE has really sunk their teeth into to try and dismantle, has been a lot of confusion from these workers at the federal level on what happens next. I thought that comment about being transparent from Elon Musk was interesting.
Well, to your point, Aaron, Elon Musk said, well, we post all of our actions on X or our website, but that doesn't explain how it actually lands with the employees in these various agencies or what legal authority they have to take some of the actions that they're trying to put in motion.
That's right. And Trump was asked about if he believes Congress, if their role in this in terms of enshrining the cuts that DOGE has made is necessary. Trump seemed to kind of brush it off, but said that he believes the vote would be there should they get to Congress.
And I want to ask you about Eric Adams, the New York City mayor, an important decision. basically, that came from Main Justice to the Southern District of New York.
Telling the Southern District of New York,
prosecutors there,
which has prosecuted some of the biggest high-profile cases, certainly in the city there, to back off, in essence. But leaves open the possibility that should the mayor lose the primary for mayor in the city later this year, that the case could conceivably be reopened. In essence, they're hanging this over his head now. If you go along to get along with us, we'll back off. But if you lose, or should there be some reason that we think you should be prosecuted again, we might reopen the case or at least keep going with the case.
So just to be clear, for those who might see a headline suggesting these charges are dropped.
Not entirely.
They're held in abeyance, essentially.
Essentially. They're kind of holding
with a kind of political implication also hanging over them.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, the mayor, let's remember, is facing a crowded, contested primary from a handful of Democrats who believe they'd do a better job than he would after the last 4 years, and after revelations in this case about was he allegedly taking bribes, essentially, from Turkish officials to get some construction projects done in the city. That plus concerns about crime and whether he is being too sympathetic to the Trump administration or reasons why he's being challenged. And now they're saying, well, we'll hold off so long as you consider our immigration policy and work with us on this. In a city that has for so long stood as a sanctuary city or safe for immigrants, he now, after several years of frustration with the Biden administration, is quite open to working with the Trump officials on curtailing immigration, sending them back if need be, and taking other steps to make sure it doesn't become a city that gets overrun by people coming from other countries.
Aaron, it was a very big event just a couple of hours ago at the Trump White House. Things tend to move in very rapid fashion. The King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, was there, sitting with the president. The president was very expansive in his comments about his aspirations for Gaza and redevelopment there. The Jordanian king nodding, being polite but non-committal.
That's right. President Trump, again, maybe a bit ambitious about his plan to, quote, own the Gaza Strip, said when asked that the U.S. would not, quote, buy Gaza, but would, quote, take it. Asked what authority he has to do that, Trump said, quote, under the U.S. authority. But he also predicted, again, progress with Jordan and Egypt in terms of accepting displaced Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. King Abdullah talked about accepting 2,000 children with cancer or other illnesses into Jordan. But it was really interesting what he posted on X after the meeting with Trump, where he reiterated that they want a plan to help rebuild Gaza without displacing any Palestinians. So certainly at odds there. We heard King Abdullah also kind of punt to Egypt and say that there are discussions there. It seems like there's some sort of coordination when it comes to Arab nations and regarding to how to respond, maybe give Trump a counteroffer, but certainly an interesting reaction from King Abdullah after the meeting with Trump.
And to pick up on Aaron's point, a counteroffer. Look, there is no U.S. authority to take control of Gaza. It doesn't exist. It may be a fanciful notion the president have, but saying it out loud doesn't make it so.
Right. And the fact that the king now has said, I'll take about 2,000 Palestinian kids who are in need of medical care.
Worth pointing out, Jordan has already taken several millions of Palestinian refugees over many years.
And from Syria as well over the course of its strife in recent years. So the king and that goodwill gesture taking a few thousand Palestinian kids may be designed to sort of have the president ease off a bit and say, hey, let me at least do that for you now. You sort out with the Israelis what the next step is. That's what he's been doing with all these cases. Panama Canal, Greenland, Canada, now the Mideast. He says something outlandish. He shakes the world. That other element gives something in return, and maybe he starts to back off. But it inches him closer to the goals he has. End the war in Gaza. Stop Russian dominance of the Arctic. Get the Canadians to give us a better deal on steel. Get the Panamanians to stop the Chinese from developing the canal. If you inch closer to all that by saying outlandish things, ultimately he's getting what he wants.
One thing in the outlandish category that might not be that peaceable in the Middle East is a suggestion, again repeated with the Jordanian king sitting right next to him in the Oval Office. If all hostages are not released by noon this Saturday, all hell will break loose, or something to that effect.
And Netanyahu reiterated it today, so now we have a new problem to watch for in the Middle East.
Very good. Ed O'Keefe, here with me at the desk. Aaron Navarro, Snorri North Lawn of the White House. Thank you very, very much.